Hello there, this is Charles DeMaris, and this is the first chapter of my novel Going Home. It's a story about a young man and his grandmother, and they're both grieving the death of the same man, his grandfather and her husband, and how they deal with that grief over the course of a lengthy cross country road trip. So enjoy. Chapter 1. Nathan Callahan hated funerals. He understood the necessity, that people needed a closure provided by public grieving, but he still was not fond of the whole charade. He was no stranger to funerals, and no stranger to grief, but he thought the whole thing to be contrived and somewhat hypocritical. Yet for all that, he found himself sitting through one, and even struggling to hold back tears. He was doing better than Myrtle Callahan, his grandmother, who was sitting there next to him sobbing quietly. His grandfather's death had come as no surprise, the inevitable end of a 2-year battle with cancer. Patrick Callahan had been a second father to Nathan since his own parents' tragic death in an automobile accident 14 years earlier. Nathan heard the minister's voice drone on, but he was paying little attention. He knew by heart most of what he was saying, the same sort of drivel you heard at all funerals, words meant to provide comfort and little else. He knew the words were true in this case. Grandpa had served God faithfully his entire life, had been an example of integrity that anyone would do well to live up to. The last funeral he had attended was pretty much the same scripture readings, the same songs, and most of the same sentiments. He had only been 14 then, and that experience was much harder to take. He could remember the day too well, though it was half his life ago. His parents had gone out to celebrate their anniversary, and he had the house to himself. He had gone to bed only to wake up at 2 a.m. to the doorbell. He remembered the hangdog look on the police officer's face and the catch in his voice as he told Nathan that his parents had been killed by a drunk driver on the way home. 14 years had passed since that night, and the grief was still there, just under the surface. The initial sadness had become manageable, and was eventually replaced by a profound regret. He loved his parents, and he was a mostly obedient son, but he had never really told them how he felt about them, and now the chance was gone. The next few days were a blur. All the relatives arriving, all the hugs, the funeral in another church, with another minister saying the same kinds of things in the same tone of voice, and then the overheard snippets of conversation, relatives discussing his fate as if he had no say in it. It was decided that he would move in with his grandparents in Piscataway. New Jersey? You have got to be kidding me, he had thought at the time. It was a hard adjustment at first, but he soon settled in. His grandparents did everything to make him feel at home, including giving him the space he needed. He had always been close to his grandparents, but now their bond was formed by a shared grief. High school flew by. He was an inquisitive introvert, which made him popular with his teachers and kept his social circle small. A group of like-minded nerds who spent all their time studying, playing video games, and fantasizing about girls while having no clue how to actually approach one. After graduating with honors, Nathan had a pick of college offers, settling on MIT, where he graduated near the top of his class 4 years later with a degree in software development. He had several job offers and accepted a position with an up-and-coming game developer in San Jose. That was 6 very good years ago. Tempest Games was now one of the top game developers in the country, and Nathan had risen with them. He loved his work and he got paid quite well. At only 28, his life appeared to be on track. Grandpa recognized early on that Nathan was not like him. Patrick had been an All-American linebacker at Rutgers and then a mechanic. He was most at home working with his hands, the complete opposite of his grandson. To his credit, he saw where Nathan's talents lay, and he encouraged him at every turn. Myrtle Callahan was in a similar reflective mood, but she was paying better attention in her grandson. This was her husband, after all, and she at least owed it to him to pay attention to what was being said about him, though she knew him far better than the minister did. The eulogy was true, and it gave the people sitting there a picture of an honest and generous man who was now in a better place. Myrtle knew him far better than that. She remembered his faults, but also how he never wavered no matter the circumstances. He was her unshakable rock. He was an easy man to fall for, the very image of the man's man, tall and athletic, dark wavy hair, and eyes of a deep blue that she could get lost in. He was a kind man, too, when he wasn't on the football field terrorizing opposing quarterbacks. She fell for him long before he even noticed her, but she waited for him to make the first move. That move finally came, and everything moved fast after that, leading to their wedding a week after graduation. That was in 1958. It seemed so long ago, and at the same time it seemed like it was only yesterday. Patrick was by her side through the pain of 2 miscarriages, and then the birth of their sons, Martin and Sean. Things were rough at first when he quit his corporate job to become a mechanic. He opened his own shop that eventually expanded to the 6 locations operating in New York and New Jersey. Then there was Martin's death 14 years ago. His death shook her to her core, but Patrick was her rock, and they made it through that trying time together. Having Nathan move in then helped more than they realized. Now she had done it. She'd let her mind wander, and the minister was wrapping up his remarks. There would be a hymn sung, then the procession to the cemetery, then the interminable reception afterwards, where she would have to be the dutiful widow and subject herself to all the well-wishers who would smother her with sympathy and condolences, while all she really wanted to do was be alone to grieve in peace. The drive to Resurrection Cemetery was made in companionable silence, passing by the golf course that Patrick had played every weekend for time immemorial. Nathan remembered accompanying Grandpa on a few of those occasions, and he remembered how he had tried unsuccessfully to get Nathan to share his passion for the game. "He would love to be there today," mumbled Nathan. "You say something, honey?" replied Myrtle. "The golf course we just passed. Perfect weather for it today. I'm sure he'd be there under different circumstances." "Yes, you got that right. There were few things he enjoyed more on a day like this. He did try to teach you to play, didn't he?" "Yeah, it didn't take. I wouldn't mind it now, if it meant spending another day with him." When they arrived at the cemetery, Nathan helped his grandmother to her chair and joined the other pallbearers. He grabbed the handle and began to walk, his knees feeling weak and a solitary tear coursing down his cheek. His ears picked up the tat-tat-tat of a woodpecker not far off, and a robin in a nearby tree singing away without a care in the world. Life goes on, he thought to himself. We are grieving here, but outside of our little bubble, the world just keeps on going. He released his hold on the handle when they had set the casket down and took his place next to his grandma for the brief graveside service. By the time he was aware that the minister was speaking, he was done speaking, and all Nathan could think was that perhaps the Lord should forgo the mansion and just set Grandpa up with a small fishing cabin next to a lake and a golf course. Nathan was taking his time on the drive back to the house, partly out of sensitivity to his grandma, and partly due to an extreme reluctance to deal with the crowd that would be gathered there. He knew they meant well, but they could be smothering at times. The liability of being an introvert in an Irish family, he thought. I can't keep it. What was that, Grandma? I don't think I can stay in that house now. Too many memories. And it's a bit big for one old lady like me. And with you working all the way out there in California, what you going to do with the house? Well, I figure I'll just sell the house and most of the furniture, unless there's anything you want. I'll find a small place somewhere, or maybe that assisted living place up in Raritan where my friend Alice moved into. She's told me all sorts of good things about it. You can't move into a nursing home. You're still in decent health. Plus, you're not that old yet. It's an assisted living facility, not a nursing home. There is a difference, and I'm 80 years old, just in case you forgot. Come on, Grandma, you don't look a day over 60. Flatter me all you want, Nate, but I'm selling the house, and that's that. But you can't go to a home. Those places are depressing. 5 minutes later, they turned onto Glenwood Drive, and Nathan pulled into the driveway. He said, "Okay, we're here. Let's head on in and face the horde." "Be nice, Nate. They're family." It was this part of funerals that Nathan disliked more than the service. He knew people meant well, but he felt that everyone was reading from a script and never came off as completely genuine. Then there were those who never struck a false chord. People like his Aunt Lillian, who simply walked up to him and said, "You look like you'd rather be any place else but here." "You know I've never been one for parties." "I wouldn't call this a party, Nate." "You sure? The way the beer is disappearing?" "Speaking of beer, you want one?" "Nah, never was much for that stuff. Any Coke in the fridge?" "I'll see. By the way, I heard your grandma talking about selling this place. Is she going to find an apartment or something?" "She talked about some home up in Raritan." "That assisted living facility up there? She has a friend who moved in there." "Yeah, that's the place. I don't think she should do it. Those homes for old people on their last legs. She still gets around pretty good, and she has enough family and friends around to check in on her." "You ever thought she doesn't want to live alone?" "You have a point. Never thought about that." "Of course you wouldn't. You've always been a bit of a loner." "You know, it's not so bad most of the time." "Come on, Nate. You must have thought about finding someone." "I think I'm going to scare up something to drink." "Okay, well, I'll catch you later." Nathan sipped his Coke and observed the room. His Aunt Lillian was deep in conversation with his grandmother, and he could hear none of what was being said. His Uncle Sean was sitting on the end of the couch, staring into his empty cup like he expected it to magically fill up again, which was the last thing he needed at this point. His cousin Margaret was sitting on the other end of the couch, sipping a Sprite and texting away with his cousin Jude, who couldn't have been more than 15 feet away, sitting in an armchair that afforded him an unobstructed view of the kitchen, which still held an ample amount of food. He was at that age where he was just starting to feel shame at overtly obvious displays of gluttony, and he was wondering how many more times he could go back for another plate while keeping his dignity intact. Nathan was thinking of heading for another plate, and also contemplating how two people in the same room would be texting one another. Didn't people talk anymore? Eventually the guests made their excuses and departed, leaving Nathan, Lillian, Sean, and Myrtle sitting in a suddenly quiet living room. Lillian broke the silence. "So, Myrtle, you're thinking of selling this place?" "I think so. It's a bit too much house for an old lady like me." "But you have so many memories here." "Nah, the memories are here," she said as she pointed to her heart. "This is just a house now. Family with kids could use a house like this." "So where will you go?" Sean asked. "My friend Alice is staying up in Raritan. There's a nice assisted living facility up there, and they have all kinds of activities." "Come on, Mom. You're not a family that dumps people in nursing homes." "That's what I told her," said Nathan. "Guys," Myrtle said, "it's not a nursing home. It's an assisted living facility." "Same difference," said Sean. "There are decent apartments you could get, and there are people who can check in on you," Nathan replied. Lillian said, "You guys ever think that maybe she doesn't want to live alone?" "Nathan seems to enjoy it just fine," Sean said. "I've never lived alone," Myrtle said softly, wiping a tear from her eye. "But I don't think I can stay here. Oh, I don't know." "You think we have room?" Lillian asked. "With Chris moving back in," Sean replied. "Where would she sleep? The couch?" "Well, there's no other family close. Maybe the place in Raritan isn't such a bad idea." Nathan looked at his grandma, saw another tear run down her cheek, and his heart broke for her. He missed his grandpa, but Grandma had been married to him for almost 60 years. He had no idea how she must be feeling. An idea came to mind and he brushed it aside, but it only came back. He pondered for a moment and then said, "I've got plenty of space." "What was that, Nate?" Sean said. "I have plenty of space. I have a large apartment." "But you're 2,000 miles away." "Actually, closer to 3,000, but who's counting?" "You think she should pack up and move all the way out to California." "You have any better ideas?" There was an awkward silence for a moment until Lillian spoke up. "That's not a bad idea, actually. She'd be staying with family." "I'm right here, guys," Myrtle said. "You're talking about me like I'm in the other room." Nobody had a response to that, and finally Myrtle spoke up again. "That makes sense, but I'd hate to impose." "It's hardly imposing if he offered," said Lillian. "You got a nice church out there?" "Sure, there are a few close to my place." "Well, I suppose I can. I've never been out west. Lillian, dear, you think you can sell the house for me? And any furniture you don't want? I only want my bedroom stuff." "Sure, I'll call my friend Susan. She's a realtor." Nathan pulled out his phone and opened an app, and Lillian asked him, "What are you doing on your phone? We're still talking." "My return flight's tomorrow. How long will it take to move her, to take her bedroom furniture out there?" 4 or 5 days at least. I'm going to have to cancel my flight and book us on a later one so we don't get there before her bed gets there. I don't have any extra beds, and I need to email my boss to let him know I'm going to be back a couple days later. Good thinking. Maybe you can find a moving truck while you're at it. Guys, Myrtle interjected, there's only one problem. Doctor says flying might not be such a good idea. Well, I hope you enjoyed the first chapter of Going Home. Stay tuned for future chapters shortly. If you'd like to check out the rest of my work, you can find links in the description below. See you next time. Thank you.